Hey, it's Editor Mac here. I ended up recording this whole thing, got it all edited down, and it was a 34-minute long video. So I'm going to cut it into two parts. I'm just going to release them 1 hour between one another. So you're going to see one and then you're going to see the other one. Sorry for the spam in your feed. I wish it wasn't annoying, but I think it's the best way to get it out to people because I doubt most of y'all are going to sit here for 34 minutes and listen to me rant. So you can kind of watch these little bite-sized pieces. So you're going to see a similar intro and a similar outro on both of them because it's effectively the same video, just two different sections of it. I hope that this makes watching the video better for you. Let me get out of your hair so you can just go back to listen to me rant about Necro skills. For Corpse Explosion, for Blighted Corpse Explosion, the only real issue that I currently have with it is that if you use the unique weapon Black River, it doesn't increase the radius of the Blighted Corpse Explosion, it only increases the radius of Plagued Corpse Explosion, so the base damage explosion. Whereas here, and it's not just a visual bug, it literally does not increase the radius. And people go, well, that makes sense, right? Because this is an AoE and it applies a bunch of crowd control effects, but this one should damn. It does not make sense. It's just broken. Like, there's no way that it's not bugged. I have reported this to the developers, and it does just need to be fixed because it's kind of BS that the best weapon, or at least thematically the best weapon for Corpse Explosion, doesn't make half of Corpse Explosion better when it should, because it says that it does. Also, at this point, now that we've made it this far and we're approaching season 1, I think that the nerfs to Corpse Explosion's base damage, so not the shadow version, but the base physical damage, were way too heinous and ultimately has made it so that Corpse Explosion in the endgame is never used for damage with Plagued Corpse Explosion. It just isn't. I don't see any builds recommending this because it isn't good. You would only use Blighted Corpse Explosion because at the very least you're getting greater than 100% weapon damage. While it's over 6 seconds, you do inevitably get more damage out of it. And I just don't know why that nerf had to happen in the first place, other than like a knee-jerk reaction to Necromancers being too strong during the leveling period back during the betas. My one big issue with Bone Prison is that it physically stops the Necromancer from being able to walk through it. And while yes, you can cast Bone Prison again so you can activate the skill again to drop it, it means that if you accidentally Bone Prison yourself, like let's say you're playing on a controller and you physically cannot manipulate where the Bone Prison drops, you can just point in a direction and hope that it works right, you will just lead to yourself or your teammates dying when you just shouldn't. It also stops your minions from being able to go in and attack monsters. I don't understand why Bone Prison comes with a negative aspect to it at all for the Necromancer or its minions. It literally should not inhibit your ability to move through an area. It should only be a good thing. Like every skill that you use should only better empower you to be able to manage a combat scenario. None of them should have a negative quality to them because it is impossible to like rationalize and theory craft and then account for a negative component to a skill. Every skill should just do good things for the character that's using them. I don't really have any issues for Death's Embrace and Death's Reach, other than the fact that in your character screen, they apply very, I'll say interestingly. So if you have no damage to distant or no damage to close, and you put 3 points into Death's Reach here, your character screen will just show you as having 12% damage to distant, when it's actually a multiplier. So if a monster is distant, all of your damage is multiplied by 1.12. It's not even like a multiplier of only your distant damage bonus, but for whatever reason, the game shows it as a multiplier, and then in your character screen shows it as a multiplier. So it's just not, and I just wish that the character screen stats, I'm not saying they're maliciously lying, but the end result is that they are misinforming the players. So I kind of wish that the character screen just got a major overhaul, or at the very least we start looking at problem skills like this that are negatively impacting your ability to determine whether or not the bonus that you're getting is a multiplier or additive or just goes into one bucket or another one in general. My major issue right now with the curses, because I will even admit Iron Maiden has a use. I will never use it in any one of my builds because I just don't think that it's good enough, but it has some use, right? Like you can turn it into a mana battery. Other than the fact that Decrepify applies a slow, and you can see whether or not a slow is on the target, because a little effect will go on them, the curses don't give an indicator for the fact that they are currently successfully applied to a monster. So especially with a boss monster where yes, you can curse them, yes, you can get the amplify bonus, but you can't apply the slow to them, you don't know whether or not the curse has run out. So you kind of just inefficiently spam this once every like 5 to 8 seconds so that you're always getting your maximum bonus, which means that you're spending an animation not doing damage. So it's negatively impacting your ability to be like maximally efficient in combat and doesn't allow the player to make informed decisions about whether or not they can rely on the monster having this damage reduction effect on them, or the, being able to rely on the fact that amplify is applied to them, or any way. Like, it just needs an indicator. We have an indicator for when monsters can like see through invisibility. I don't know why we can't just have a little curse icon pop over their head. Seems like the most elegant solution, but there needs to be some type of indicator that I've applied this debuff to a monster when there are no alternative ways of being able to determine that. I think that the bone passives, so these 3 bone skills here, cooldown reduction, crit chance, additional damage after critting enough, and then just additional crit damage against vulnerable targets, are literally too powerful in comparison to its contemporaries. So the ability to gain a little bit of movement speed, the ability to apply stagger for all intents and purposes, and sometimes some crowd control, and then conditional increases to your damage types when using darkness skills, and the blood skills. Yes, Drain Vitality is cool for being able to generate Fortify, although at the very least, like for Blood Surge, as well as Blood Mist, they also already apply Fortify. But then you just have like a small multiplier for blood skill damage and then a small multiplier for overpower damage. And that's it. This, nobody is going to put more than 1 point into Gruesome Mending. Like, nobody's going to put more than 1 point into this. And I don't understand why this isn't a choice that you make as opposed to just a dead skill point 100% of the time. And then Blood Orbs also heal your minions. I get it. I actually don't even think that this one is terrible, but it creates a very specific scenario here where bone skills are clearly never meant to interact with your minions in any way, shape, or form. You might say that the darkness passive skills are supposed to work with your minions, but they only work very specifically with the Shadow Mage option. So it just doesn't work for Cold Mage, doesn't work for Bone Mage, it doesn't work for any of your golems, and it doesn't work for your skeletons. So this isn't really interacting with your minions in any way except for that one specific type, which at the very least they've fixed Shadow Blights that your Shadow Mages proc it. So maybe I'll eat my shoe in a little bit. But the ability for Blood Orbs to heal your minions, meaning that I have to be a build that generates Blood Orbs, meaning that if I just wanted to pick this up as like a minion generic survivability tool, I have to put a dead point into Gruesome Mending, and I'm forced to build into the blood passives. Now, you don't have to build into the rest of them, obviously, but this says right here, blood is for your minions, but also blood doesn't empower your minions, doesn't make them do more damage or interact with your minions in any other way, shape, or form. So I don't get why this thematically is here and why it's not just down here as opposed to like, this bonded in essence, which increases how much they get healed by once every 5 seconds. I have a whole bunch of problems down here. We'll get to that into a second. Just to round that back up. The blood passives are crap in comparison to bone. The shadow passives are at least utility based and are still crap in comparison to bone. Bones are just too powerful. And for whatever reason, there's a minion specific blood passive when in reality, this should just be a minion passive. And there should be another thing that either increases attack speed on blood skills, which is the thing that blood skills need the most of, or it decreases essence costs on blood skills, or something that would be worth putting into it. So I don't realistically have any problems with corpse tendrils or ways that I think that they could legitimately improve corpse tendrils. And if the Necromancer's like total build tree wasn't so restrictive to like force you to use particular skills, I would actually be completely fine with this. I just wish that there was legitimately a way for us to generate blood orbs, either better with blood skills so that they actually had that as part of their theming. Did you notice that only Blood Lance and Hemorrhage generate blood orbs? Blood Mist doesn't, Blood Surge doesn't, none of these passives make it so that you generate blood orbs, but you could always take the ultimate, and also like your key passive doesn't interact with blood orbs. I just don't understand like thematically why the blood skills don't interact with blood orbs more often and just have an innate ability to be able to generate blood orbs. But corpse tendrils, without question being the best tool for generating blood orbs, just thematically fails on a lot of different levels for me inside of the Necromancer. And it also means that many builds literally have to choose between our one avenue for being able to fortify or consistent vulnerable proc, which would be cool if it didn't hamstring your build so entirely to choose between the only defensive way that you can build into it or the only damage way that you can build into it. I just kind of wish it was moved away from Corpse Tendrils so you didn't have to make that decision. And instead, maybe Corpse Tendrils like allowed it to become a blood skill or allowed it to become a shadow skill or something like that, similar to Corpse Explosion. So we had more ways of kind of adding this into builds that would benefit from more of the passives. Would it really be too powerful if Necrotic Carapace just procced maybe as a lucky hit ability whenever a corpse was generated, either via killing a monster or by Hewed Flesh or anything? Would that really actually be like too strong that fortifying for 2% of your base life would somehow like just become viable? I don't think so. I just feel like Necrotic Carapace as a whole needs to be reworked because right now it just isn't an option unless you're very specifically using Reaper skeletons who generate corpses to ever be able to rely on actively generating Fortify from this 3-point skill investment. Now the ultimate passive node down here is going to be rough because I just don't get it. If I'm being sincere, I just don't get it, but I'll try to keep it succinct. Bloodwave just needs to do more damage, bare minimum. It just needs to do more damage as a 50-second cooldown, and it does 120% weapon damage, which in comparison to any of your core skills is laughable, and realistically only gets applied when using Ultimate Shadow to make it a darkness skill that people are kind of like messing around with, and for generating blood orbs at least a pseudo Corpse Tendrils rate. Army of the Dead also just needs to do more damage. I think that pound for pound Army of the Dead is like just on the cusp of being a very, very cool skill. But the fact that you can't direct the skeletons in any way that explode means that you're using an ultimate ability and then you are unable to direct that damage. Like at the very least, if I put on Bone Storm, I know where the Bone Storm is. I can at least cast the Blood Wave in a direction. And if Army of the Dead is going to be a pseudo chaotic and non-targetable skill, the damage that it outputs needs to reflect the fact that you cannot target monsters with it in particular. And then the fact that it's 2 bonuses. Like, let's look at these 2 bonuses, right? Army of the Dead skeletons have a chance to leave behind a corpse. They don't even always leave behind a corpse. They have a chance to leave behind a corpse. And then it resummons your skeletons. I've always had a problem with this because while it makes sense, and I do get it, and it's very helpful. The reason why it's very helpful is because in the early game, your skeletons just fall over constantly. And while they have been slowly trying to, meet us like halfway and make the skeletons better and at least allow us to direct them, if I need to use a 70-second cooldown ultimate ability just to be able to resummon my skeletons, that's a problem. Better damage on it. Always leave behind a corpse whenever one of them explodes. Why else are they there? And then maybe just reimagine the design space where Army of the Dead has to raise your skeleton warriors and skeleton mages and ask the question, why would we want to be playing a summoner build where we need to rely on such a long cooldown just to make sure that we have our primary damage dealing ability, which theoretically would be your skeletons. Then we talk about standalone and Momento Mori, which I like a lot. It gives you additional bonuses for having sacrificed your skeletons. Now, the only problem is that standalone is kind of your only way to really gain damage reduction other than specifically Decrepify and specifically Death's Embrace. The Necromancer is already incredibly squishy. Its best damage reduction skill requires me to not be using summons to get any benefit out of it. Now, you can argue like, oh, what if you're only using mages and then you only have, 5 mages? So you're still getting 8% damage reduction, which means I'm getting 8% damage reduction for 3 skill points, and that feels terrible. Memento Mori I like. I just don't know why it doesn't also apply to the Golem. I don't feel like that would be overly powerful. I never realized that Druids continue to gain just the passive benefits from their Spirit Boon selection, even if they don't have companions out. Like, I thought it was very similar to the Necromancer, but the Necromancer either has its summons or has the passive bonuses, and you only get 1 from each of them. So I just think that Memento Mori could also increase the Golem buff, and then a lot of builds that rely on Golem buffs would also feel a lot better, and it feels like a pretty simple change to make there. And then we got to kind of talk about these right here, which is, kind of harping on this thematic complaint that I have, which is how many skills do I need to put points into just so that my skeletons won't die? So we have 3 points here so that we can heal them more often. The heal feels terrible. I'm sorry, it just does. Like I'm so disincentivized from trying to heal my skeletons because of how long it takes and how little I'm able to heal them. On top of the fact that I can't heal through AoE damage in high nightmare dungeons like Fire Enchanted. Like they just get one tapped. I don't know what's up with that, but they just do. I kind of hope that that's a bug. But then I'm putting in 3 more skill points that says, hey, at the very least, they'll have to take 4 hits before they die, on top of needing to put in individual skill points to each type of mastery so that they gain more base life so that they won't die. And then I need to put minion health stats on my rings so that they don't die even further. And then I also need to pick up the Paragon boards, which gives them even more life and defense so that they don't die. That's so much investment in my skeletons just not dying so I can rely on them doing damage, like for long enough where it would be worthwhile to even use them. And not to mention, again, the transfusion, which like nobody is ever going to pick up, but it's like, oh, now my blood orbs will instantaneously heal them. So it's actually even like more efficient just to build into transfusion and blood orbs from corpse tendrils than it is to try to actually rely on this 5-second cooldown extra healing efficiency node and this thing that says that they can't be one shot. That's so much skill point investment to make these things less than paper dolls. But let's talk about Hellbent Commander. Hellbent Commander says that my minions deal more damage when I am close to them, which means that I need to be in melee range with my skeletons and my golem so that they get more powerful, but then my mages are too far away from me. Or I could be near my mages so that they get more powerful, but then my skeleton warriors don't get more damage and neither does my golem. Hellbent Commander should just kind of be an aura that says your minions deal more damage, kind of just across the board. It's a little vanilla, don't get me wrong. But in this game, especially when you're pushing later dungeons, you can't choose to be in melee range as a Necromancer and successfully survive. You just cannot do that thing unless you're a pure blood build. And even that, you're actually just relying on crowd control, like permanent uptime on crowd control to be able to survive. Now let's talk about the key passives. And I'll try to keep this one a little bit short because I think it's pretty simple, right? 1, Rathma's Vigor just needs to be better. It either needs to say you have a 20% chance to overpower with blood skills, or it needs to say that your blood skills always have a chance of generating blood orbs, or it needs to say the overpower damage actually works from the Paragon board. And also, could Rathma's Vigor just give me movement speed? Like, it's Rathma's Vigor, and it doesn't increase my movement speed at all. I don't know where else a Blood Necromancer is supposed to get movement speed, but it sure as heck ain't here, and this thing could actually have like a list of 5 buffs that it would give. It would still be worse than Shadow Blight and Ossified Essence, and I think that would be perfectly fine because blood builds need a lot because they just do not function in any real effective way unless you have near perfect gear. And then Kalan's Edict, I have complained about this a lot. I just desperately wish that Kalan's Edict would be changed. But again, for people who haven't heard me complain about this one in particular, let's kind of walk through it very quickly. Kalan's Edict says that if I haven't taken damage at all, any form of damage in the last 2 seconds, and I have a ton of minions out, they gain 30% attack speed. Inspiring Leader says that as long as I maintain healthy status, so above 80% life for 4 seconds, me and my minions gain 12% attack speed. So for the stipulation of never taking damage in any 2-second period, I gain 18% additional attack speed. If I have enough minions for this thing to trigger, meaning 7 or above, you can already use Unyielding Commander when using Army of the Dead on a 2-handed weapon to gain them a ton of attack speed. There's a second aspect that says that as they're alive, they just gain more attack speed too. I get that attack speed is like one of the only ways to scale their damage because their damage is so crap because they only get 30% of our bonuses. Giving them more additive attack speed for the stipulation of never being attacked for greater than 2 seconds is just wild. It's just absolutely wild to me that this thing has any stipulations to it at all. It could just say your minions have 30% increased attack speed. It would still be terrible, and I would still hate recommending using it to people. But at the very least, I could say if you put a point in here, you will be more effective. There you go. Those are all of the changes, issues, and bugs that I hope are addressed in the Season 1 balance patch of the Necromancer. I think that a lot of these things, at the very least, would open up a bit of the design space and also just make just like skill choice decisions a little bit harder on the Necromancer so that you would be actually sacrificing something to gain something. You know, like pretty typical rewarding theory crafting type stuff, as opposed to, like you've heard me say before, just kind of use the 4 best skills in the game and then interchange whether or not you have a generator or a spender. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you hadn't seen any of these issues or hadn't heard about any of these bugs, let me know down below if you want me to cover anything in greater detail. Consider leaving a like on this video just so that the algorithm knows that, like, hey, this dude explains stuff in a good way and I want to see more of it. And consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. I've drastically exceeded my expectations for growth on the channel since Diablo 4 has come out, and that's been phenomenal. Thank you so much to everybody. But I'm trying to hit 40k subscribers before the end of the year, which would mean that I quadrupled my viewer base in 1 year, and that would just be an amazing accomplishment for me. So again, if you haven't already, consider clicking that button. I would super appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I truly hope that it helped, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.